Design in Formula 1 is an incredibly difficult challenge, and sometimes engineers will come up with something so groundbreaking, everyone's in a rush to either copy it or get it outlawed. And sometimes designers go for function over form, and turn up with something absurdly wacky just to find a bit more downforce. We've seen everything from periscope rear view mirrors, double rear wings, and six-wheeled cars in the hopes of finding performance, but some of the concepts never quite lasted, with the FIA stamping them out for one reason or another. So let's take a look at some of the solutions seen down the years, with some of them banned more quickly than others. We start our journey in 1997 when Tyrrell introduced a new concept in an effort to add downforce to their car. This all began when the team found a loophole in the regulations that allowed them to place winglets high and wide of the car's main body, in order to capture airflow in the free stream. Deployed only a handful of races in 1997, they were used as a way of generating the extra downforce necessary for the circuits that demanded it, and became known as X-Wings. And no, we don't mean those X-Wings. That's a completely different thing. Tyrrell also used the X-Wings to make it easier to tell which of their drivers were at the wheel. A welcome addition for fans and commentators alike, Jos Verstappen's X-Wings sported yellow paint, while Mika Salo's were painted red. However, some of the new narrow track regulations and groove tyres introduced in 1998 played directly into Tyrrell's hands, as the X-Wings would allow them to claw back some of the aero downforce losses that the rules changes had caused. Whereas the wings were bolted onto the 025 when needed, the 026 was designed with the X-Wings in mind, and as such it was actually believed that they contributed up to 5% of the car's overall downforce, which was likely a factor why 4 more teams swiftly followed suit. Prost, Jordan, Sauber and even Ferrari all went to sport their own versions during the 1998 season. The new solutions that arrived from other teams varied in quality, and seeing as they hadn't incorporated them into the main design like Tyrrell had, they were much flimsier, which raised safety concerns with the FIA. After some deliberation, the FIA finally decided to intervene and banned the wings on safety grounds, consigning them to a long list of solutions that have been briefly allowed by the governing body, only to be outlawed at a later date. And moving on to 2001, it was the turn of Arrows and Jordan, both of whom rocked up to the Monaco Grand Prix with some rather ungainly winglets. Both teams had found grey areas within the regulations to mount the appendages from the nose to the chassis respectively, in a desperate attempt to add downforce. The unorthodox winglets, which bring to mind the crazy high wings used in the 1960s, were immediately put under scrutiny by the FIA, and banned before teams could even qualify with them. So while we're on the topic of those high wings, let's travel back in time, and take a look at what the teams got up to in an era that was not as tightly regulated. As wings began to show up on the cars and provide a tangible performance benefit, it would clearly lead to an arms race, with the teams installing taller and wider wings in an unrelented game of one-upmanship. These skyscraper wings, as they became known, were predominantly installed on the suspension struts, with the expectation that the downforce would be applied directly upon them, translating into increased grip. With aerodynamic understanding firmly in its infancy, these high-mounted wings were mounted on extremely flimsy supports, which couldn't withstand the associated loads. This led to some pretty spectacular failures, but undeterred the teams pushed on with their experiments, and set about finding ways to trim the wings, so they could get more performance out of them for cornering, but shed some of the downforce as speed built. Think of it perhaps as an early DRS experiment, with cables used to alter the angle of the wing via various methods, including the installation of a fourth pedal in the cockpit. In 1982, Ferrari introduced a rather odd double rear wing arrangement at Long Beach, with one wing placed in front of the other to span the entire width of the car. The solution was never meant to offer much in terms of performance, and it was actually a political swipe at a growing ploy by teams to ignore what many considered to be the spirit of the regulations. Gilles Villeneuve would be disqualified after the race for its use, opening the door for Ferrari to use it as ammunition with FISA for banning another controversial and rule-bending solution that the non-turbocharged teams had been using that season, water-cooled brakes. But that's another story for another time. Accelerating back to more modern times, let's look at 1995, when McLaren installed a mid-wing on top of their engine cover, as they not only looked for additional downforce, but tidied up the turbulence created by the brand new opening required around the airbox and engine cover to sap performance from the engine. In 1996, Jordan followed in McLaren's footsteps and introduced its own version of the midwing for Monaco. Mounted astride the engine cover, this imposing winglet likely produced a reasonable amount of downforce in its own right. Staying with McLaren then, we also have their Viking Horns, which clung to the side of the airbox and helped to tidy up flow to the rear wing. It's a solution that would garner elsewhere on the grid, with other teams seeing fit to install similar horns of their own. The solution wasn't expressly banned, of course, but rather the more vanilla rule set introduced in 2009 simply lessened the possibility for them to be used. Ferrari revived the solution for 2020, with a set of Viking horns found on the SF1000 at launch. The smaller version is a product of the prevailing regulations, but their purpose will remain the same. In the 2006 French Grand Prix, BMW Sauber had a couple of new winglets, or twin towers as they became known, mounted above the suspension. Living in a small zone between the legality boxes, the solution would be short-lived, as the FIA allowed them to be raced in France, but banned them from the next race onwards, suggesting that they might obstruct the driver's visibility. In 2007, Honda introduced a very strange set of winglets on the bridge of its nose. They didn't stick around for long, but made a triumphant return in 2008, with not only Honda using the design, as a large percentage of the grid took up the idea too, albeit in their own inimitable way. Dubbed the Dumbo Ears, the winglets weren't used with the express intent of creating downforce. Their actual purpose was about flow conditioning, creating flow structures that would help create downforce downstream. 2009 was supposed to see the aerodynamic furniture that had sprouted out of the cars over the last few years cut back dramatically. However, the teams are always reluctant to give up on performance, and quickly set about trying to find avenues to find discernible differences from their rivals. During pre-season testing, skate fins appeared on the cockpit on the Williams FW31, which clearly occupied a small blind zone in the technical regulations, but the FIA stepped in immediately and banned them on safety grounds. And so that's it for our roundup of the various banned wings seen through F1's history. Think we've missed any? Let us know your favourite weird F1 wings or any other of your favourite banned F1 cars in the comments below, and just maybe we'll pick your banned suggestion to talk about next time.